From Chicago, this is Bruce DuMont with our Beyond the Beltway analysis of national politics, featuring occasional injections of rumor and innuendo, all offered up by our panel of political insiders, pundits, power brokers, public servants, professors, and most importantly, plain-speaking Americans from coast to coast. Tonight, featuring commentary by Mark Carbonaggi, Dan Johnson, Marty Garrity, and Nick Calm. Our program tonight coming to you from our own base at the Museum of Broadcast Communications in Chicago. Nice to have you with us. Happy New Year. There are no calls tonight because we are recorded. But again, if you'd like to send me an email comment, it's brucedumont@museum.tv. You want to send me a tweet, it's at Dumo, at D-U-M-O. And of course, you can join us on the World Wide Web, audio and video, every single week on this broadcast, beyondthebeltway.com. If you miss it on a Sunday night, we're here all the time at beyondthebeltway.com. We've got a whole year to review tonight, and it has been quite a year. And I want to begin with our guests with a specific question because each one, I think, will have a different perspective on this. As you look back at all the events of this past year, either things that happened because you're a member of that party, or things that happen on the other side that bring glee to your body. Mike Carbonaggi, we're going to start with you. You're a Cook County elected Democrat, Board of Review. My question to you is, what was the most significant national or international political story of the year in your view?
Probably how quickly and how effectively folks mobilized. So, for a lot of Democrats, the election of Donald Trump was a shock. And I think back to 2000 when Al Gore and George Bush had a heated race and ultimately it was decided by the Supreme Court. Democrats spent about 2 years until the midterms wandering. We didn't know who we were and what we were. In this situation, the day after the inauguration, 1 million women marched in Washington, and since then it's been one organizing effort after the other, and it showed up at the ballot box.
One of our Republicans is Nick Calm. Nick, what is your answer to the same question? Biggest story of the year to you?
Well, I would say, Bruce, it's the gift of Harry Reid. I think what Harry Reid did in terms of changing how the Senate approves judicial appointments has been an incredible gift to Republicans, and we've seen it with a record number of appointments that the Trump administration has made.
Dan Johnson, one of our other Democrats, progressive Democrat. Nice to have you with us.
Great to be here.
Happy
Thanks,
New
Bruce.
Year.
And congratulations. This is your last day on an amazing run building the Museum
Right.
of Broadcast Communications.
That's it. A couple of hours to go.
That's right. We're still in it.
Then my signature on the check means nothing.
I'll take that $100,000 check, please. I'll deposit it tomorrow. This was the year of Donald Trump. This was politically, he
Must have made you happy then, right?
Look, it's I like to call it, it's our walking dystopian nightmare that we have Comrade Trump and the authoritarians have taken over our republic. But it was clearly his political year. He reshaped federal politics. And the one signature defining accomplishment, besides, as Nick said, appointing a lot of ridiculously unqualified judges for a lifetime, is cutting corporate tax rates. And they did it.
Marty Garrity, or other card-carrying conservative Republican, biggest story of the year?
I'd say the biggest story of the year is the tax bill that was passed last week, which essentially defines the election of 2018. Either it's going to be a disastrous tax course, and the Democrats are going to take everything in 2018 and probably impeach Donald Trump, or the Republican version of what is likely to happen will come true, and we may not even remember the name of the Democratic Party as of January 2019.
Mike, do you agree with that? Any piece of that you agree with?
I agree that one of the parties is no longer a business, but I would argue that it used to be the grand old party. Bought and sold to a guy who everything he touches in the Republican Party goes bad. Walks into Virginia, they lose. Walks into, I didn't believe it, Alabama, they lose. Democrats are outperforming.
When you say they, who do you mean by they?
Every candidate that he comes in, that Donald Trump, President Trump, comes in to support, campaign for, support on Facebook,
on a political front, is the Roy Moore loss? Is it good or bad for Republicans?
It is bad. It is bad. for Republicans.
We've got Republicans over here. They're shaking their head the other way.
Because the margin in the Senate where they need to get things done. Again, to Dan's point, they're not getting anything done, and they barely limped out of 2017 with any kind of agenda. As they wander into 18, you look at the agenda in 18 and go, what's it going to be? They've got smaller margins and a more liberated Senate to not support the White House.
Okay,
so
Nick?
as a Democrat, I feel really great. We're going to get some stuff done.
I mean, there's no question that if Roy Moore had somehow squeaked out or eked out a victory in Alabama, the Democrats would have hung him around the neck of every Republican running for every seat in the country. So I think it was a momentary bit of rationality there by the Republicans in Alabama in terms of not coming out and not supporting him. So I don't think at all it was a gift. I think they're very fortunate for the Republicans that Moore lost.
And Johnson, what's your take on this? I
look,
mean, we have Senator-elect Doug Jones.
Yes.
He's going to be taking the oath of office in a few days.
Which is great.
His mentor was Howell Heflin,
Yeah.
one of the most conservative Democrats in the Senate. So are you optimistic that this guy is he going to go and vote the way of Chuck Schumer?
No.
Or is he looking at re-election and he may be a lot more moderate or conservative Democrat than you personally like?
He's gonna vote in ways that I personally, as a Bernie Sanders delegate, don't like at all. And I'm going to be delighted that he's serving in the Senate. I think it's important that the South have Democratic representation. And I want to credit, to Nick's point, people like Republican Senator Richard Shelby, who a few days before that election said, I will not vote for Roy Moore, and I'm going to write somebody in.
That was the turning point, I think.
And I think there are two things that are worth noting. One is, undeniably, half the Republican electorate are people that are happy to support folks like Roy Moore or authoritarians that are happy to be in bed with Russia. Half the Republican electorate doesn't like that and never liked the rise of Trump and is sort of enduring him because they'll, advance the agenda. But let's not pretend that really problematic part of the Republican electorate that is for Moore and for the authoritarians hasn't gone away.
Marty Gurdy.
When you think about it, it wouldn't make much difference in the U.S. Senate next year, if there are 52 Republicans or 51 Republicans, because you've got Collins and Murkowski, and in fact, Corker will still be there, and there's no telling what those guys are going to do. So the notion of
for whatever period.
May not be there long.
I know. But the difference between 52 and 51 is nothing. In fact, what it really does, if I'm Susan Collins or Lisa Murkowski, I'm delighted because now they need me alone.
Here's another issue. Because of the sexual harassment issue, which started in Hollywood, then ended up in Washington, as well as a lot of other stops in between, the media headquarters of many networks. What do the Republicans have to do, and do they have an opportunity, Nick? Because your reputation restoration, that's what you do. Mm-hmm. Do they have an opportunity to restore the reputation of the party in the wake of Roy Moore and compete with the Democrats for appealing to women, but because they seem to have responded in a much more demonstrative way to the sexual harassment issue than have the Republicans?
Well, I think based on the fact that you've had serial harassment from both sides of the aisle, and I think the fact that that's been exposed to be a problem with both parties, I don't know that the Democrats or Republicans are really having an advantage to press there. What's interesting is whether the Democratic position about the war on women is going to endure or not, because they've had enough problems on their side.
We've got a pause. We will return. Thanks for joining us on New Year's Eve, 2017. Live from Chicago, it's Saturday Night Live, The Experience. Tuesday through Sundays, and open late on Wednesday nights at the Museum of Broadcast Communications. Order tickets at museum.tv.
A line is a powerful thing. It connects the global economy to your living room. Cleaner air to stronger markets. Factory floors to less crowded roads. Today's progress to tomorrow's promise. Norfolk Southern. One line, infinite possibilities.
Because of all of the terrorist attacks this past year, both in London and Barcelona, around the world, and also in New York City, and also obviously a different type of terrorism that took place in Las Vegas, I want to ask, we'll start with you, Marty, have Americans, in your view, become numb to terrorist attacks?
Are we on?
Yeah, we're on.
Oh, sorry about that.
Got to stay awake,
Wow,
Marty.
wow, easy
Hello,
on,
I know it's New Year's Eve. And
easy on the bubbly, Garrity. Take it easy on
We're
that
gonna cut this
champagne.
guy off.
What is in your eggnog that you're giving us all, Bruce? It's very strong.
I would say that Americans have adopted a rather reasonable approach to this, and that is there's nothing you can really do about it individually. As a society or as a police force, maybe something can be done, but I don't really think that I can worry about whether I should go downtown on a particular Tuesday night, because if it's going to happen, it's going to happen. And we become sort of fatalistic, but I think
And
in this
suburbanites
case,
usually are worried about coming down on a Tuesday night anyway.
well, Tuesday nights are a bad night, you know.
Mike, what about it?
5 years ago, a mentally deranged person walked into a school and killed 20 first graders in Newtown. And I remember thinking, if this doesn't serve as a wake-up call to have a responsible, bipartisan conversation about gun control, nothing will, and nothing has happened. So I'm not sure what it's going to take. I mean, a madman went to an outdoor country music festival and in a planned, methodical assassination attempt, you called it terrorism, I think that's the right word, killed dozens of people and injured hundreds more. I'm not sure.
Legally. Everything he did legally.
Legally.
Well, that begs the question.
And I'm not sure
begs
what
the
it's going to
question.
take for that conversation to move into action.
Mike, I'm sorry, Nick.
I have a different take on it, and probably an unorthodox one for a Republican to say, but I'm going to say it anyway. I think if it is somebody like the shooter in Las Vegas or the shooter in Newtown, Connecticut, or there was one a number of years ago in Nebraska that my firm was involved with dealing with.
And there was one in Texas this year, too.
In Texas as well. I think if it's somebody who is not obviously a Muslim, I think Americans tend to look at it in a more dismissive, fatalistic way, as Marty was saying. I think there's still a very heightened level of sensitivity because of 9/11 and related issues. I think if it is somebody who is doing it in the name of Islam or as a Muslim name, I think the level of sensitivity that Americans have is still very high around that, and it leads to a desire for action where, sadly, and I agree, it's sad that when it's somebody who is not with that as their persuasion, there tends to be a more dismissive attitude.
I just want to add one thing. And you think about, and I'm glad you mentioned that. Kind of just giving the fact pattern kind of drives a lot of this conversation. I mentioned Newtown as I had a first grader at the time that happened, and I just remember my wife and I, when the kids went to bed, just being shaken and going, "What does this mean?" Then you think about all the other ones. Okay, maybe members of Congress will want to move this conversation toward responsible gun control if one of their own is shot. Gabby Giffords is shot. Okay, well, maybe if it's not a Democrat, if it's a Republican. This time a Republican got shot at the congressional softball game. Mm-hmm. So the fact patterns just drive them more and more, and you're like, okay, I'm not sure what it's going to take, but we have to have a thoughtful, responsible conversation.
The shooting of Steve Scalise at a Republican softball, based on the shooter there and his background, it had some connections to Illinois. I mean, he had a political agenda. And the question is, because of the climate we have in the country, because of this, whether it's the resistance movement or the reaction to Barack Obama, we can go back how many years you want. But because of this hatred that is based, in many cases, based on partisanship, that bothered me. Because here you had a Democrat out to look to kill Republicans. There wasn't an outrage about it, but that's a fact of life in that particular case.
I think I put him in the same mentally deranged category as the one who massacred those people in Vegas, and the people that shot up, my elementary school of Hubbard Woods, and the people that shot up in Newton. I think there are lots of mentally deranged people, and I think to Nick's point, we need to be. I appreciate your candor, because it is true. Way too many Americans treat a brown person that shoots up innocent people differently than a white person. And that's wrong. Not only morally, it's just wrong in that it directs us to try to stop this from happening down the wrong path. Like saying this ridiculous Muslim ban, as if that's going to protect any of us, instead of saying mentally deranged people ought not have weapons of mass destruction.
Well, if you knew that all of the Muslims that have done this were mentally deranged, that your point might be good. But these are not people who are mentally deranged. These are people who know what they're doing, who know why they're doing it, and whose point is political and most literally terroristic. They are terrorists in the most literal sense of the word. And that's different from the wacko who shot up Steve Scalise or who shot up Newtown. That's a very, very different thing. And if you can prevent people like that from getting in, or at least investigate them, vet them carefully before they get here.
But of course, how many of the 9/11 terrorists came from Saudi Arabia, right? And of course, Saudi Arabia is not on the ban.
But
the idea
that's
that
an irrelevancy, Dan.
What do you mean
and
irrelevant?
Know it.
Let's be honest. The Muslim ban is an outrageously ineffective and stupid response to try to preventing terror when you look at the facts of where terrorist attacks in our country have come from.
They've come from all over the place except for that.
Well, no, but I just...
But that was before the issue.
Is it safe to say, Dan, that if you're looking at countries that do not have any infrastructure to properly vet the people, their officials to vet the people coming from their country, and they have no paper trail, is it so outrageous to say that maybe people from that country either should be held up for a while, not let into the country, or certainly they deserve a much stronger vetting? Because there's nobody in their home cities or home countries
but who are
that
we
are doing a good job.
Like, who are we applying this to? Syrian refugees. These
Yes.
are orphans, largely women, the people that have had the worst 2017 imaginable.
Right.
And we're applying it to them. And to me, and one more point.
But everything.
Let me just say one point.
The defense of this is everything is about women and children. Now in that group, because we've had intelligence experts, if you believe them, who say that within that group there could also be young men who have a desire to be jihadis.
Yeah, there could be. Nothing is riskless.
If you look at the photos
what I
of the
found to be
people-
appalling is when Republicans made banning Syrian refugees, when embracing refugees is about as American as apple pie, inscribed at the base of the Statue of Liberty, making that a partisan political issue, which they did to some degree successful, was, I think, helping to set the table for all the abominations of the Trump administration and the folks like Roy Moore that are riding on this dumb wave.
It's the fear issue
Yes.
that I talked about before,
Fear.
and the different kind of reaction that a violent incident perpetrated by a Muslim or somebody with a Muslim-sounding name provokes in people, and that's clearly a response to that. I think you can take a different point of view as to whether that's the right solution to it, or more vetting, or both, or whatever it is. But I think that's clearly where that comes from.
I want to switch gears and go to something else, which really is a dominating story of the year, and that is the investigation into allegations that the Russians somehow, colluded with the Trump administration. It's really dominant. It's been the big story of the year. Obviously, there was the firing of James Comey, the hiring of Bob Mueller, the recent indiscretions of the FBI agents looking into the investigation. So my question I'm going to ask everybody, if we turn back the clock a year, Donald Trump had not yet been elected, or he had been elected, but he was the president in waiting. When you look at everything that's transpired since the resistance began the day after the president was inaugurated on January 20th, Mike, are you confident that the Democrats, that the resistance movement, that you have made a really solid case that Donald Trump somehow was manipulated by the Russians? Do you believe that based on everything that we know now in the investigation.
We have an ongoing. Oh, okay, step back. Before I had my current job, I was a federal prosecutor. Everybody I know who worked with Mueller said that this registered Republican, Marine veteran, Silver Star, was a man of credibility, as McCain and Lindsey Graham and a number of other Republicans have said it.
Newt Gingrich.
And Newt Gingrich has said that. And also it was kind of that gold star in your resume if your career somehow brought you into a matter with him, because it meant that you were a person of credibility. So to ask, is it the resistance, has the resistance brought those facts out? I think what you're seeing with Bob Mueller is a quiet, thoughtful procedure where he's collecting written evidence, bank records and what have you, phone records, email records, bringing in witnesses then to corroborate, answer questions about those written records, and then bringing in indictments, and when possible, getting people to cooperate to move the investigation forward. We're at the beginning of it. We're really at the beginning.
Okay, as a former federal prosecutor.
Sure.
And again, let me say that the description of Robert Mueller as Mr. Integrity from the get-go is something that everybody still talks about. The indiscretions of the FBI agents, albeit they were ultimately fired by Bob Mueller. He didn't release that information real quickly, though. But on that staff, there were allegations from the get-go that staff, that investigative staff, was filled with Democrats, some of whom just wrote checks to the Democratic Party. And again, perhaps they can show some degree of integrity and bias. But when you look at Peter Scorch and his lady friend, the FBI lawyer, I mean, can you, as a former federal prosecutor, can you say, wait a minute, this guy really screwed up? Not Mueller screwed up, because he should have known the level of hatred this guy had. And frankly, Scorch screwed up because he should have volunteered to Bob Mueller when he was being investigated. Hey, listen, I don't think I can do an objective job here because I hate the guy so much he's an idiot.
Everything I've seen has shown that Bob Mueller did exactly what you should have done. When he became aware of the Scorch person, he immediately didn't ask him to resign. He fired him. And then everything we're seeing right now says that these investigators, like anybody, have the right to their own opinions. But
we're going to come back to that because the Republicans are shaking their heads the other way. Okay. We'll hear from them and more from Dan Johnson when we roll on New Year's Eve 2017. Wherever you are, hopefully you're not drinking and driving right now. Choose which you want to do and then do it well. Thanks for
If you look hard enough, go off the beaten track far enough, you'll find an America teeming with the unusual, the odd, the downright strange.
I'm Will Klinger, and I'm your guide on a package tour we like to call
Wild Travels.
While we're preparing a new season of Wild Travels for next year, join me for some of our favorite episodes Tuesdays at 7:30 p.m. on WTTW Prime.
When you run a business, you get to build something much better than a resume. You get to create value that didn't exist before. And then you get to see even more possibilities. At MB Financial Bank, we know why you work. MB means business.
Dallas, St. Louis, Nashville, Tuscaloosa. All major cities to feel the destruction caused by a direct hit from a tornado. Is Chicago next? It's not a question of if, but when, and the clock is ticking. Learn what to do now at ready.illinois.gov to become tornado ready.
Bruce DuMont back. Thanks very much for joining us. New Year's Eve 2017. Boy, it's been a great year, and I know everybody's going out to celebrate after the show tonight. But Nick, you and Marty Garrity were shaking your head horizontally, viciously, when Mike Carbonaggi was making a point about the FBI agent. One bad apple, and the investigative team should not throw out all of the evidence that they have uncovered so far.
Well, I'm amazed when I hear Democrats say, you know, FBI agents, they're like everybody else. They're entitled to their own political opinions. Everything is fine. Of course they're entitled to their political opinions. But if that if those political opinions become so extreme that it calls the behavior of people who are charged with investigating and exculpating the Democrats' nominee for President Hillary Clinton or leading the investigation into President Trump, we have a major problem. I mean, if we can sit there and we can investigate, and I think many people would agree, I think most people would agree that the Russians did try to influence the election. I don't know many Republicans and certainly no Democrats that say, oh no, the Russians didn't try to influence our election. They did. The question is whether the Trump people were involved. Again, Flynn, Mueller was able to get a guilty plea out of Flynn. We'll see what happens with Manafort. But the idea that somehow because Mueller fired this FBI agent, somehow everything's okay. We don't need to investigate what he did or didn't change in terms of the language exonerating Hillary Clinton. It's ridiculous. I think if we're going to investigate, let's investigate everything.
A quick question. I want to come back to Marty, but I want to ask you, Dan, just on that particular point.
Yeah.
Would you acknowledge that the revelations about Peter Skorich and his texts to his lady friend, the lawyer, would you acknowledge that it creates at least an appearance of impropriety?
I think Nick put it well that, first of all, what happened to respecting law enforcement? And
what does that have to do with it?
Well, I'll tell you what it has to do with it. Here's what's really troubling.
Are there no crooked cops?
Of course there are.
Are there crooked FBI agents?
Of course there are. And are there crooked presidents that
Yes,
built
maybe.
a
Yes,
real estate empire likely funded by Russian billionaire oligarchs who refuses to disclose where his money came from?
You're off the reservation. Back to my my question.
Are there presidents like that while in office?
Could be. But back to my question.
Yeah.
Because I think you on this program you generally can be pretty objective.
Yeah, I try to.
So I'm going back to just this point.
Yeah.
Does it raise an appearance of impropriety that you have this person, Peter Skorich,
yes,
who is not only in on investigating the president, who he hates, despises,
yeah,
and also that person was in on the interview with Hillary Clinton and suggested to James Comey that he change the language, and the changing of that language resulted in Hillary Clinton not being indicted. Does that stink? Even a little bit? Is it even a little bit stinky?
I think Nick is right. I think if there's a bad apple, remove him, punish him, and if it means you got to take another look at an investigation from last year, I'm fine with that. But let's just recall, let's not pretend the FBI is some Democratic operative organization. Let's recall the last week before the election, it was that FBI, including those crazy Trump FBI folks in the New York office, that pushed this letter saying it's an open investigation into the biggest non-story ever, the emails, which swung the election in a significant way. Let's just put it in the broader
Let's
context.
recall before that, I mean, the reason that the FBI had to do, or the Attorney General the FBI had to do that, is that he had preempted the prosecutorial procedure earlier by saying there's no reason to indict anybody here. There's nothing to see here. Nothing to see here. Remember too that there is, as of right now, this Mueller, this wonderful fellow Mueller, has come up with nothing that indicates that there has been any collusion. He may come up with something,
sure,
but as of right now, there is no allegation that any collusion
I just want to
occurred
jump into
between Trump and the Russians. The collusion that is there is the Steele dossier, which was funded and promoted by the Democrats.
Turned out to be accurate so far.
Yeah, right. And
it's all been accurate.
And it's all about the Democrats working with the Russians to get something done to help win the election. And it's about the Russians trying to help the Democrats win the election.
Wow.
Mike,
no amount of evidence of no amount of bias can create evidence of a crime that wasn't committed. And what we've seen here is a mountain of evidence that we've seen in the early stages of an investigation from Mueller of communication, correspondence, cooperation, maybe collusion, that has resulted in less than a year in 2 indictments and 2 pleas with now cooperating witnesses. So Mueller is at the beginning, maybe midpoint. We don't know about his investigation. And as it moves forward, we can expect Trump to fire up his base and certain Republican members of Congress to demand special investigations and inquiries. What's best for the country and democracy is if a person with unimpugned integrity in Robert Mueller that Democrats and Republicans have entrusted to continue this investigation without distraction.
But a large portion of the country no longer trusts him.
But why is that?
Let me finish.
No.
They no longer buy.
Don't say a large part of the country no longer. The president wants you. He grabs it and says it.
I'll withdraw the word larger. there is, I think growing is an appropriate word. There's a growing number of people who are not necessarily, they're not politically astute in that they're not reading the political columns every single day. They will look at this. They will read they will read the texts of this guy with his girlfriend, the FBI lawyer. They'll read those and they'll say, hey, how can this guy be objective? If evidence is coming before his desk that makes Donald Trump, is there anything that's exculpatory to Donald Trump that this guy's going to accept? Or is he going to reject everything? To me, it doesn't pass the fairness test.
No, but Bruce,
I'm glad he's fired. He should be fired.
But Bruce, I don't know. I haven't run into many Republicans who now question Mueller's integrity. Okay, but
his judgment. I think his judgment.
Well,
his judgment.
Wait, which judgment was this?
among other things,
but
here's let me just finish the judgment. And I'll go to the judgment is whether or not he did the proper job of vetting every single member of the team he hired.
That's
my question.
That's fair, but
it's
I think
a vetting issue.
But I think the bigger issue is that this investigation now of the Trump administration has become irretrievably tainted because of these fired FBI agents who were at the center of the investigation.
I don't buy that.
I think
Not
it's
at all.
very
Not at all.
difficult. I think it's going to be very difficult for the conclusion of that investigation to have significant credibility in any quarter of the country. If it's an exoneration of Trump, people are going to believe it's because Mueller was a Republican and he was always friends with.
I want to cut this off and move it to the next logical place, okay? Because obviously we have a different of opinion here, and it'll be played out in the campaigns of 2018, okay? Do you believe, to our Democrats, do you believe that the impeachment of the president is an important part of the message you as a party wanted to deliver people in 2018 so that your candidates for Congress are running because if they get elected, Donald Trump is going to get impeached? Is that a positive thing? Because, I mean, you've led the resistance. You've got a whole year of churning up the ground. Many of your constituents are saying, okay, what do we do next? And you've got members of the Senate and House saying, let's impeach the guy. And as political operatives, is that a good idea, Dan? Is that a winning strategy?
I think he walked in with impeachable offenses against the Emoluments Clause, collecting payments from foreign governments for his global...
Is it a winning strategy to win control of the House and Senate? That's my question.
I think this. I think it is, just on a straight-up politics, it's a distraction. I think the blue wave is a blue tsunami. And I think the sort of establishment Democrats that are like, hey, tamp it down, which is what they're doing, I think they're right on the straight up political strategy because it, I think, confuses the message that most people are interested in.
We have an establishment Democrat here.
Yeah, right.
I will say
you're a
that
Bernie Sanders Democrat.
That's right.
I will say, I know exactly. I will say that your question is it a winning? It depends on the audience you're talking to. Every day that Donald Trump has his phone in his hand is a great day for Democrats. You have a president who defended Nazis in Charlottesville. We got a lot to run on. We have a laundry list of stuff to talk about. His offenses against women, not supporting the DREAM Act, the Muslim ban, this tax bill
Act isn't done yet.
And he supports it.
Exactly. This tax bill that 35%.
Democrats didn't do it when they had control.
65% of Americans did not support this tax bill that just passed. It has an approval rating of 35%. So in terms of impeachment, we don't have to talk about impeachment. We got a whole lot to talk about.
But would you acknowledge, or what Dan said is that the Democrats that talk about impeachment may be hurting the message for 2018?
Oh, I don't think so. No.
Okay. All of these things, though, impeachment, all of the things that Mike just rattled off, these are sideshow issues. And I understand it. If I were a Democrat, that's what I would talk about, because you've got Latino unemployment at historic lows. You've got black unemployment at historic lows. You've got the stock market.
Barack Obama called. He said, "You're welcome."
You've got stock market. That's so funny. It's interesting that he took 7 years to blame George Bush for the challenges he was having. Barack Obama.
700,000 jobs were lost in the first month.
And then when he steps out of office, he's going to take credit for what, the next 3.5 years of economic growth under Trump, including whatever growth comes out of this tax bill that was signed last week?
If indeed
Democrats get elected to fix it.
If the Democrats want to talk about all of these odd things,
more power.
bring it on, because the only thing that will matter next November will be whether the tax bill that was passed last week has succeeded. If people are getting way more money in their
Are they going to know it? Will they know it?
Absolutely not.
I can't wait to hear Democrats running on the fact that they voted against a tax cut.
I will say,
don't want that.
let me
Tax
go
bill.
back to the impeachment
Quickly,
thing. Here's
Dan
the reason.
Johnson.
Here's the reason why it's not great to be a partisan issue, because that half of the Republican Party that is fully aware that it is unambiguous that Putin is for Trump, that as Trump weakens the West and weakens our institution that stops authoritarians like him from continuing to be a large
the same
despot.
Trump.
Hold on, let me
the
finish.
The same Trump who defeated Hillary Clinton, who gave uranium to the Russians.
All right, so let's pretend on that one. Listen,
Oh,
right? No, let's pretend.
Pretending is a good idea.
We have to pause. When we come back, I'm going to let you make your case.
Thank
Let
you.
the Republicans respond to it.
Happy New Year.
I'm Bruce DuMont from coast to coast, border to border, wherever you are. We hope that this is not the first night you've discovered this show. We've been here for 38 years.
Right.
But again, we hope that it's the first time you're spending New Year's Eve with us. And drive safely. Don't drink too much. Back shortly. Live from Chicago, it's Saturday Night Live, The Experience. Tuesday through Sundays and open late on Wednesday nights at the Museum of Broadcast Communications. Order tickets at museum.tv. DuMont back, and we cannot go through this segment talking about national politics without talking about the influence of the national news media. So we're going to start with our Republicans. They may have a thing to say about this. Marty Garrity, on a scale of 1 to 10, where would you put the credibility of the American news media right now, with 10 being terrific?
About a 2. I mean, basically, something like 50% of American voters today think that their taxes are going to go up under the new tax bill, because the media have been hitting every time Chuck Schumer or Nancy Pelosi says something bad about the new tax bill, it's bad for America, and 50% of Americans think their taxes are going up.
They're going to go up in many states.
In fact, 5% of Americans will see their taxes rise,
Brookings
and
did a study on it.
95% won't.
Okay,
but
so
the
that's
media
a
have
two.
persuaded
That's a two.
them.
I'm going to hear from our other Republican. What grade would you give? We got a 2.
I think that's way too generous. I'd put it somewhere negative. I don't know. It's whatever, 37 below 0. It couldn't be lower.
Now,
Because
let's
if you
turn
look
to
at-
let's turn to our Democrats
No, because
and
you-
see if they have a different. Mike Carbonaggi.
I think it's probably closer to a 7 or 8, but I'm just going to make. But I'm going to make this point. They're going to say their news is probably an 8 or 9. Fox, my news probably a 2. I'm going to say their news is probably a 2. My news is
All of it
probably an 8.
lacks
I think,
credibility.
but I think
You're right.
I think we're getting
It is.
segregated
the
in our
national
media.
are your news. Let's not fool ourselves.
So I think the New York
ABC,
Times, I think the New
CBS,
York Times,
New
the
York
Washington
Times,
Post, I think the print, I think we're seeing a resurgence in print being the leaders. That long form investigative journalism where you're not rushing to get on with a breaking news headline, but you're going to do that 3-part story that begins on Sunday. The national print is really taking the lead.
Look at the
I
polls.
want to get Dan Johnson's.
I think-
What grade would you give the national news media?
I think it's rising largely because I don't recall any administration that's been so hostile to the concept of a free press, which is so foundational to a republic.
Do you know of any presidency that has been the subject of the degree of venom from the news media? I mean, literally. I mean, accentuate the negative.
Venom.
Every single.
It's been
Wait,
quantified.
inbound or outbound?
It's been
Inbound
quantified.
from.
Both.
I mean, the idea of fake news
But
from the
news
president.
media is the
appalling.
politicians are supposed to be partisan. The news media is supposed to be objective. And I'm just saying is that if you looked at all the network news, let's just focus on network news. And throw in CNN and throw in, let's take out CNN and let's take out Fox because they cross each other out. So you're looking at the big three network newscasts, and a lot of people still get their news there. I don't think anybody can look at those newscasts for a year and say that the thumb has been on that scale on virtually every single newscast. There is no positive Donald Trump story.
But they're reporting what he says and what he does.
No.
And then they're saying, can you believe how biased they are?
No, but
they're reporting on what he says. I will say the opinion is passionate. On Fox and on other channels, it's passionate.
Oh,
but on the reporting on the news,
so-called news.
But it's there's an interpretation of the news. It used to be that if there was a debate over, let's say, the tax, okay, you'd hear one side and then you would hear the other side. I don't think you see that anymore.
Yeah,
and
but this is not something that started since January 17. Heritage has been putting out their own analysis of Democratic plans.
Heritage.
Others, National Review has been writing.
CBS, NBC.
We've seen these national stories.
I like in our republic a free press that challenges authority.
I
when
agree.
Trump happens to be in authority and has an authoritarian streak, I like.
Dan, they took
that
an
our
8-year
free
nap.
press-
The media
Where
took an
were they
8-year nap.
during the Obama
I
administration.
mean, come on.
Well, look,
When
invent
were
your
they
time
critical?
machine and let's have that debate now. But all we can talk about is the media today. I don't know why Republicans
time
don't
machine
think
idea
it
is a great escape for
wonderful
you.
to have an oppositional free press that challenges authority.
No, but that's fine, but they cross
Well,
the
then
line
embrace it.
dramatically every day. It's been it's not an opinion issue. It's been the number of negative articles that have been written and segments that have been produced about Donald Trump. It's like 20,
Yeah, but
30 to
that's-
1.
but that's
Wait, no,
separate, but-
you'll say he brings it on. They're just reporting what he says. It's not even remotely objective. And then what other people don't talk about is that, everybody talks about, oh, Donald Trump's polling is so bad. Look at the national media's polling, Bruce. It's in the tank. It's in the cellar. So if everybody's like, oh, it's on the rise, everything is wonderful, you wouldn't see that kind of credibility gap that exists.
But
that's why it's below
but
zero.
what happened in my view, as a media observer, when the election was over, the country was split. Okay, it was split, and when one side was gnashing their teeth and they were going to organize, and there was going to be a resistance. And one group won the popular vote, and the other group won the Electoral College. And I think from a business sense, I think the big three networks said, okay, we got to choose sides here. We're going to choose the side of the popular vote because there's more people. We're going to choose the side of the popular vote because it's the bigger states. The demographics are more perfect. They're not a bunch of older, white, rural, conservative, born-again Christians because they don't buy anything anyway. And so literally there was a business decision. When I'm talking about, when I'm saying we now, I mean the big three networks.
All right.
The big three networks, Saturday Night Live, all the hosts of all the late night shows, it is 100% anti-Trump because they're playing to the base. And you know who figured that out? Stephen Colbert figured that out.
All of that
He
is
was dying on the vine until he decided, I'm going to jump in, I'm going to be the leader of the resistance in late night television.
All of that is true, Bruce, and you have innate bias, and you have people who are married, executives from news organizations married to top Democrat operatives.
Let's not forget about the Republican media like Sinclair Broadcasting, which is freaky how they just are a straight-up propaganda
Can you name a
machine.
Sinclair station in Chicago?
WGN.
Not yet. Not yet.
WGN
On that note, Nick Calm, Marty Garrity.
Happy New Year.
Happy
New Year. Happy New Year. Happy New Year, everybody.
18.
We'll be back sometime. Don't go away. Thanks for joining us tonight.
Welcome to the world 2116. You can fly across town in minutes, or across the globe in under an hour. Whole communities are living on Mars, and solar satellites provide Earth with unlimited clean power. In less than a century, Boeing took the world from seaplanes to space planes, across the universe and beyond. And if you thought that was amazing, you just wait.
Live from Chicago, it's Saturday Night Live, The Experience. Tuesday through Sundays and open late on Wednesday nights at the Museum of Broadcast Communications. Order tickets at museum.tv.